Hi guys. This evening we have San Marie. Many times we often talk about how people are struggling to get jobs, and we all have our different opinions as to how people can approach the whole job application process. So this evening, I have someone who is an expert in this matter, who will just basically share some of her insights with us, and hopefully make your job hunting a bit easier. So we'll be having a conversation around what it takes to sort of thrive in the job markets as we stand in today's world. Welcome, San Marie. I'm actually hoping that you'll first just give us a brief introduction into who you are and as well as what you do on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
My background, 17 years ago, and it almost sounds strange to say, when I started my career, I started off in recruitment. I joined the marketing division in the insurance space in the corporate world. And I also headed up a marketing division in the asset management firm. So I spent quite a bit of time in corporate, but an equal amount of time in the recruitment space. And I've been back in recruitment for quite some time. And I focus specifically on fintech and IT recruitment.
Awesome. So first question, San Marie. Why is it so hard for people to get jobs these days? You know, many people often say there are no jobs, and I often dispute that answer. I see it almost as a way of taking shortcuts when you say there are no jobs, and yet I have never seen a newspaper run out of ads for jobs, as well as any of the recruitment site that you go to, or even people that you speak to. Even the companies that we're currently in are always sort of asking us, do we know any people with particular sets of skills? So I wanted to ask you, why is it so hard to get a job these days?
Coming from employees is, why is it so hard to find a job? And employers are asking us, the search consultants, why is it so hard to find people? So there's a clear disparity between supply and demand, very obvious one. I mean, you can argue that people aren't matching the right skills in terms of what they're studying, or what they're qualified as, versus what the demand is. And that might be true to some extent, but most of the time, employers and employees are like two ships in the night, and they miss each other, which is a sad reality. There are so many platforms that enable people to look work and post their CVs, and sometimes there's just so much data out there, and it's so complicated that we're kind of missing that human connection in between. And that's one of the real problems that I work on solving, and making sure people connect and we're solving the issue. And other than that, technology has changed. You know, years ago, and I'm sure you can agree with this,
yes,
you had maybe two types of development from a demand perspective. You either had a Java developer requirement or a C# development requirement, whereas now it is so complicated. You don't just get two main. So from a technology package perspective and a fit, it's also so vastly different now.
That is actually already, we've started off on a high note, because I love how you answered that employers are also asking that same question as well. That is actually that is a good one as well. So it almost leaves you wondering then what's going on if there's such a lag or a gap in miscommunication between both employers and potential employees. So, San Marie, just to take it away to the next question, what positions are currently in demand right now? You mentioned just now how technology has obviously just been a game changer in many industries and many environments. Obviously, you know, I do have my biases as far as technology, but I just want to get your whole rounded view of what you think is currently in demand right now.
Exactly, Julo, and you've touched on a topic here. So two things I don't get involved in is discussing politics and coding language preference. Which one is the best? So
yeah.
So I'll answer the question purely on demand, okay?
Yes.
So don't shoot the messenger. But there's a couple of developments that are on demand. So C# development remains one of them. Java development, although JavaScript is overtaking in terms of what clients are requesting, and then Python development.
Yes.
So Python is quite close to another stream that I focus on, which is data. Yes. And Python just works so nicely together with data. You always find those two kind of in the same world. And in the JavaScript space, I mean, what JavaScript can do now versus what it used to be able to do, it's opening up a whole world of algorithms, and it's just enabling business. So those are the areas that are on demand, and of course you've got cloud and other overlays. But in terms of demand, I'd say those are the 4 baseline development roles that are in demand right now.
Okay, so Sanmarie, basically we're saying right now at the top of the list, just in tech, the jobs that are currently in demand are more in the software development side of things currently as we speak.
So overall, yeah, so you look at your development side, I do say there is an emergence of the Python development and data.
Yes.
Data is becoming a lot bigger quickly.
Yes.
You know, in the past, people were able to manage all their data information on Excel, and that was fine. And then we realized, oh, we're actually learning how to service our customers better. So we've got more information on them to give them a better CX and UX, user experience, and customer experience. So now we need bigger data lakes, and we need to be able to build Hadoop into this and big data, and we need more developers sitting behind that. So it's almost like data, well, especially from where my clients are sitting, data is driving the demand in the background in terms of what other technology and what other people need to be in place.
Very interesting. That is very interesting. So I guess then it would put one in a sort of an advantage if they start looking or start digging deeper into what these technologies are. Obviously, from our current chat right now, most people will not be familiar with data and all those types of topics. But which leads me to my next question: how can people start getting involved now? So we've mentioned what's in demand, but how would you start? Because I mean, you can imagine it can feel quite overwhelming for anyone starting out when they look at all these different posts and they are certain that they do not qualify for these posts. And what often happens at times is people will still upload their CVs anyway, you know, and then and only to be discouraged when they receive no feedback. Or in some instances, people possibly call tech recruiters, for instance. They're asked maybe to upload their CVs into the various databases that the recruiters are in charge of. But then at times, certain people never even get any feedback after a while. So I can imagine how discouraging. In fact, I do know how discouraging it can, because I was once in that situation. So I just wanted to ask you, Sanmarie, just in your view, obviously I know it's a big ask, but I'll ask you anyway. What would you do to start interacting with these various technologies, considering the fact that you might have not been involved with these technologies at all, but just as a start or as a foot in the door? What would your advice be to some of the guys that are starting out?
Exactly. You touch again on a very important point. It's information overload. There's so many silver bullets that get promised, and you know, there is a solution that's going to work for you, but let me put it this way: the silver bullet that's going to work for you is not necessarily going to have your name on it. So you are going to have to try different things. And if you look at the platforms that are open and available, the online platforms that are available to people, this is now assuming that you've decided the direction that you want to take. And if you haven't, we can touch on that briefly as well. You understand what these platforms are designed to do and how they work and how they don't work. So if you're looking at an online platform, you're uploading your CV. Remember, you are chasing that system. It's not really chasing you. So you're playing by that system's rules. So if that system says, load up your CV in these categories, and I know people hate this, load up and basically mirror your CV, you need to do it because they're working on keyword searches. And the keyword searches may be set up in such a way it can't search your CV. Or they use those archaic, you know, Boolean or Boolean searches, not even artificial intelligence. So you need to understand how the system is set up. Then you've got network, which also work well. So like I said, it's not a magic, but you need to try a couple, see what works for you. And also in a network. So you've got people in your world, and you think that you've got a touch point with everybody in your network. But it's set up in such a way that the data is served in a digestible chunk. So you're going to see people who are active in the market, or people that, as a search consultant, for example, I'm actively searching out. And those are the people that will be served up to me. So you do need to have an understanding of how the systems are designed to see what works for you. You need to build a relationship with a recruiter to help you and to market you in the marketplace, if that's not.
You got cut off a bit there. I think you were breaking off quite a bit, but I heard your last point, which was also you need to build relationships as well with recruiters. So don't just only interact with the platform. It's quite important as well to realize that you are actually communicating with human beings. Human beings are on the other side of the online platform that you might be using to do your job search. You also touched on quite an important point, which I think. In the past, I've actually made this mistake as well. And that's why when you mentioned it, it actually, I started going back and I started thinking to myself, that's why things went the way they were going. And the point is, you made a point on how all these platforms have been configured to work a certain way. So you find people are out there using online platforms and uploading their CVs. But the mistake that I used to fall into was that after I've got this long list, I'd figure it's in my CV. So I'd just literally just drop it off and I'd be like, now why must I answer every single? Is this really important, especially the optional portions? So now you can imagine having someone with these blank spaces and then you are sitting on the other side and looking through all this information and sifting through all this information. I'm sure you'd be prone to look at the guy who's got all the information properly filled in than someone who's still got blanks there. So yeah. So I fell into that one as well. So I think that's that was very insightful of you bringing that up, because I've also, and I do know many people get, especially when you've worked on many different platforms and you've been uploading across various environments, you get to a point where you start to not answer as questions because you assume it's already in the CV anyway. So thank you for that. Then
exactly, and you would think that, okay, we're going to more digital world. Those keyword searches are just going to become more and more prominent.
Yes.
Artificial intelligence, you've got bots crawling information as well. So if you think it's going away, there are systems that make it easier for you to do. But the sad reality is it's not even a case that, oh, I'm not going to look at your CV because you don't have all the information. It's that your information is not going to be served up to me because you're not going to appear in my world.
Sure. And already that's it's quite serious when you think about it, because it automatically means you yourself have done something to disqualify yourself from the position that you want to get. So it's quite a serious one when I really think about it now. Things that you might have taken for granted can actually work sort of against your favor. So thank you. And then the next question, Sanmari, is what do you look for in talent? Because you obviously sit on the other side of the table. So what things sort of stick out to you? Because candidates have their assumptions. We all have our own assumptions as to what you value as important. And normally at the top of the list, we assume it's more experience and obviously the time served. We assume it's because you hear many topics being thrown around, sort of how you'd potentially fit into a particular culture, etc. So what do you look for in talent, especially to someone? Here's someone, I'll give you a scenario, and I'm sure you've already gone out, but here's someone new, they've uploaded their details. What sticks out to you?
Yeah, of course. So you definitely halfway there on the mark. This is if you're dealing with someone who works in a specialist niche area, which I do. So I work in the fintech space. So if you're in the same job family as me,
yes,
we need to have a coffee and have a discussion. So I'll definitely want to include you in my network, only because your chances of success are going to be better, because I know for sure that my clients would look for someone with your skill set. And because, look, I use an independent system, so I've got a little bit more time than I used to before. So even if your CV is not up to scratch, yes, I'm able to have a discussion with you. So it does not disqualify you, but please, your CV is so important. I can't stress it enough that your CV is your online sales person. It's speaking for you before you can even try to speak. And because of the way things are set up, you have to get that right. Yes. But I won't disqualify you if your CV is not on par. I do have a coaching session with you. We have a heart-to-heart. We have a few discussions about it, and we make sure that you're right. But if someone comes into my world that's not in my immediate family, I'll do a gentle catch and release and pass you on to someone who I know can help you. But if I see you're not in my world and your CV is pitiful, I don't do a catch and release.
Mhm.
I'll first have a conversation with you and help you, because I know you won't have no fighting chance out there if we don't fix up a few things.
Yeah. No, at least you help ease the pain somewhat, because I mean, once you go through various platforms and and you have many chats with people, especially it's easier when it's a couple of days, but after months and months, after a while it does sort of become a bit of a a bit of a challenge. Having said that, Marie, it can't all be good. So, no, I won't say irritates you, because now that's we're personalizing it. But when it comes to dealing with potential candidates, right? What makes you look the other way? Where you're like, no, this has to stop now.
Uh-huh.
Let's just find another person, and yeah.
Right. So kind of what attracts my attention, but for the wrong reasons.
Yes, exactly.
So I am a stickler for CV, because I can see the impact that if you've got the skills that you and I are talking about during this discussion and you're not getting callbacks, it's not you, it is your CV. You have to get it right. And so many people have such a small thing they need to change. I mean, there's an example of a chap that I helped recently who's been on the job market, unemployed for 2 years.
Sure.
And I cannot imagine how that feels. So I managed to come across this guy on social media, had a conversation with him. At the time, on the Friday, he showed up for an interview, and the recruiter failed to let him know that the job had been filled.
Yeah.
It was just, I mean, you've been unemployed for 2 years as well, so it's an awful situation. So I said to him, right, let's just start somewhere, send your CV through to me. And it was a typical CV where he didn't describe what he does, he's a specialist, he's actually qualified, and it's not on his CV. So we had our moments, and also he didn't have a digital CV, so it was a fax copy, which also makes it very hard, given how sophisticated the systems are becoming, for you to have a paper-based CV that's not readable once again. But anyway, it ends well, because we had a conversation with the guy, fixed up his CV, and he found a contract job.
Nice.
And ever since the contract ended, I know, right? He's also found some work, so he's now standing on his own 2 feet. And his whole life has changed.
Yes.
You know, so that is something that annoys me, but because I know that you're hurting your own chances, that's why it irritates me.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I mean, just that story of hope, I mean, it actually it means a lot, especially in a country like ours, where you already know the desperation, basically that is around us every day, and even worse during the pandemic. So to actually have a story of someone that had been searching for 2 years. How far back did you say they got the contract work? Is it quite recently, Sanmiri, if you don't mind me asking?
Recently, during level 5 of Corona, after being
Imagine.
unemployed for 2 years, he found it.
Imagine.
Hey?
Imagine. So it actually makes one happy, because you think to yourself, it's not impossible if people are getting, and again, it kills off that argument of there are no jobs. It just means we need to find some sort of way to make sure that we meet the standards of the jobs that are out there. And obviously, it will take time. I'm not saying it's going to be some miracle pill that's just going to happen. But at least if we start to speak, I think, if you know what I think, something, I actually think, just to add my opinion, if people would, right now, I'm having a conversation with you, but if people would actually speak to people like yourself and actually hunt you down, I know in certain cases it may seem like you might feel like you're an irritant or you're becoming irritating, but I mean, just go seek the help, go to the source, I think then people wouldn't be throwing things out there and just wishing for magic to happen. If people would actually just take the efforts and just start from step one and say, clearly I missed the mark because I've been sitting at home for 3 years. So what's next? Let me talk to someone, like how people that with therapists would actually speak to their therapist or whatever, so I'd expect that they'd do the same as well, that give that level of attention to their job search instead of just hoping things will just happen. Yeah, so that story that you actually told me is very encouraging, and it shows that it is possible, and I guess that's what we would like people to get from this conversation that we're having right now, that it is possible that under level 5 someone was getting employed, and yeah, so I guess in many ways people can choose to be a statistic, or they can choose to make their way out of being a statistic, and it is true that there are various situations. You did mention as well that we're not going to get into politics. So what I will say is there are various circumstances, and I won't mention them all, but we can tell ourselves that from this circumstance, how can I make my comeback? That's all this conversation is about, is how can people make their comeback? Yes, this has happened. Yes, this has happened. I lost my job because of the current pandemic, but now how can I make my comeback? And I think one of the key areas is to start speaking to people like yourselves, just to get a bit of information about where to start. Yeah. So on the next question, Sunmarie, you mentioned the different platforms that you use, and I think there's a particular platform that you use currently right now. So I guess the reason I'm asking is because people throw their things on. I won't say throw, but people upload their CVs on Gumtree, for instance, and there's various platforms. I won't mention them all, but with the assumption that they are being seen by you. So now the question is, do you ever go on some of these platforms, or do you just stick to, or you, as well as other organizations that you maybe know of, recruiters are moving away from using some of the platforms that are out there, maybe just using their own in-house and getting people to upload their information and their CVs there. So what do you use? And if people do throw their stuff elsewhere, what happens to them?
Absolutely. So it's quite interesting because I can really glance back in terms of how we did it years and years ago, and there was a heavy reliance, certainly from my side, with online platforms. Whereas as I matured in my career, you build up your tribe and your people. It becomes more about connections with people and referrals. Certainly there is still a place for online platforms, yes, and they all work together. I myself, in my opinion, what I always ask is, am I certain that my client is getting a view of the best person in the market? As much as we say there are lots of jobs can be scarce in certain areas, and I need to make sure ethically from my standpoint that I have access to as many people who could be a good fit for this role as possible. Yes. And I think any good recruiter will have the same sense, where you try and rely on as many different sources as you can. But something that I also want to mention for the guys out there who are using an online platform, as a search consultant on some of these platforms, you can tick a box that says, only show me candidates who've updated their profile in the last 31 days.
Sure.
Now, the danger there is if you're a perfect candidate and you've updated your CV 32 days ago, once again, you might not fall into our line of sight. And look, good recruitment companies are going to have databases to kind of mitigate the risk. But if you're a new person entering my world for the first time, I also might miss you. So really, you have to put yourself on multiple platforms, once again, because they work in different ways.
Thank you for that. So that's another point. So I'm hoping that the guys can actually see that it almost feels like there are so many things that you can do to disqualify yourself from the position that you want. And then you'll have many things to blame for it, but you actually had no idea. So you can basically only work from a point of view of the amount of information that you have. So if you're coming in blind, then literally you'll be asking yourself questions why there's no feedback. In some instances, even something as silly as your emails you're receiving, maybe ending up in a spam folder, and you think that people aren't responding. Little basic things like that, I think, are quite important, especially as in the era that we're living in, where, as you had mentioned earlier on, we are not dealing with a lot of faxes anymore, where it's become a case where almost companies that use fax machines are now frowned upon and are thought of to be sort of doing some sort of fraudulent activity. These days, I've heard quite a lot of that. So I guess not all, but yeah, so I guess it's quite important also when the guys actually upload their information to make sure that they pay attention to detail and not just do it for the sake of doing it, especially if they've enlisted on multiple platforms. So I think another insightful point that will be of great use for the guys. And then I'd say two more questions, Sunmarie. And the questions I actually want to touch on is currently, what proactive measures? I know it's actually quite similar to one of the previous earlier questions, but I guess I still find value in this question. What proactive measures would you have someone actually take right now that is that is out there, that is available on the market.
Look, and this speaks to what you mentioned as well, is about, someone needs hope. Some people have been unemployed for a long time, and they've been beaten around and knocked around by the system and ghosted. So I understand it feels like you have tried everything, but I promise you haven't. So if you want to chat, I'll also open my door. Anybody who wants a fresh perspective, please speak to me. There's something we haven't tried, and there's somebody that tried something and it didn't work. We tried 6 or 7 different things before something worked. So let's go on a journey together. But also, just to get back onto, if you're deciding what technology to look at, and this is just very quickly what I wanted to share, the software development community specifically are excellent at sharing information. So there are so many places if you want to learn, is this technology going to work with my style of problem solving? Is this the one that I want to do? Get onto groups like Cura, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. There's Medium, there's Stack Overflow, Reddit. There's so many great places where you can ask questions. And it also opens up a whole world of other questions that you haven't even thought to ask because you're new to the technology. So you're able to get different perspectives. I also run a volunteer program, Collaborate, where we've got mentors, big brothers and big sisters, where we match someone who's high up in the career path where you want to be, and this person is able to help you and equip you. And just bridging that gap. What we also make sure is that not only do you have a common goal in terms of your career, but there needs to be some personality match and a chemistry match. It's the only way I can describe it.
Yes, I get what you mean.
Interest in someone. Yeah, so I mean, you need to have a vested interest. Changing someone's perspective or helping them, people think it's going to take one email or one conversation, but it really takes an investment of time.
No, that's true. Sanmarie, you also touched on quite an important one, and I think that's one of the things that many people actually ignore. You spoke about collaborate. If you could just add a bit more detail there, because I think, in essence, our conversation right now is about collaborate, and the reason I say that is people are looking for people that they can look to, for a bit of information, and as I mentioned earlier on, you can only make moves based on the amount of information you have. So if you've got a platform that you can actually adopt or adhere to, that will allow you to actually gain insights from other guys that are doing what you'd like to be doing, I mean, you're already miles ahead of other people, and without even intending to, but just because you know that there is such a platform. And I think the biggest challenge is that people don't know that these things exist, So can you please elaborate again on Collaborate and how long it's been around? And yeah.
So Collaborate formally has only been around for about a year, but it's something that as a company I've been involved in, and the companies I've been with for about 6 years, and we're trying to unpack it and see how to make a difference in people's lives. And we will also initially in that vein of light or that train of thought where you think if you make one interaction, you don't actually make a difference, where we realize that it takes something more sustainable and people need to really invest. Look, at the end of the day, there's more people that want to make a difference and they get it. And this is where we're talking about those change agents, where unemployment has become somewhat of a topic that is desensitized if you're not unemployed. It's almost like we talk about it like, oh, well, the weather's bad. Oh, well, unemployment is bad, but let me not get too uncomfortable because it's too big of a problem. I can't solve it. I'm one person. But it's like you're saying, all it starts with is, and I challenge people who are chatting about unemployment or hearing someone say this to challenge the conversation, interrupt the conversation to say, what is the solution? Just people to start thinking. It starts with an idea. An idea became something that we started looking at, because there are people who understand and they get it, that it takes a little bit of investment of time to build a community and build people around them and affect change. And together we can, sounds like such a cliche, but together we can make a difference.
Yeah, no, but it's true. It's true, Sanmarie. And one of the reasons it's true, because you touched on a couple of very interesting points, is what I found when it comes to the job situation. And I mean, it's obviously I'd never sort of badmouth anyone, but it even comes to conversations like with reaching out to you, you know, you cared enough to actually make a bit of time. I know there could be other things you could be doing right now, but you cared enough to make a bit of time. And I think the biggest challenge is, which is what you had alluded to earlier on, is that most people, it's like, oh, but the job situation, most people are more concerned about the stats than providing a solution. Like everyone, it's sitting at what percentage? Wow, it's sitting at what, most people are concerned more about the stats, but they don't really understand that the stats actually represent human lives, and that certain people can't buy food for their families if they're parts of those statistics. I guess the conversation hopefully will some way somehow we can get to a point where even as a society we can become less selfish, and because I mean it's easy watching stats from your TV or from your computer, and you're like blaming everybody else but yourself. But the reality is, if you are working and you know that your job is in demand, I mean, why not stand up and do something about it and at least tell people this is what I do? And it's going to take a lot of work, but after a couple of years, don't make them think it's some get rich quick scheme, but this is what I do. It's going to take lots of years, and it's going to take sweat, sometimes sleepless nights of work. But at the end, I guarantee you, you'll be in a better position than you are right now, versus just looking at the stats and complaining about the numbers and not doing anything about it. So I really appreciate that point that you raised. When it comes to the biggest challenge is that most people just don't care. I know it's not the most politically wise thing to say, but when you say to someone, it will feel like you're bad mouthing someone. But the reality is most people just don't care as long as you are sorted. You see, anyway, the interesting thing about it is right now while we're having this conversation is it would only hit someone when they hear this chat, that really deep down inside for someone to do a bit of introspection and to think to themselves, yeah, maybe I don't care. I think it's better if there's that light bulb moment in each and every person versus hearing from someone directly. But so that's quite an interesting one. And then my last question, Saint Marie, is with what you do, right? If someone is interested in becoming a tech recruiter, because for me, it seems like from my conversation with you, it seems like more of a calling than anything else. Because I mean, if you're dealing with that many people every day, you can have multiple approaches to it. You can just see people as another number, in which case I think it would be a very boring job. But if you see people as actual people, I think it would be a very, very interesting job. So if someone wants to become a tech recruiter, specifically I'll say tech, because that's what we're dealing with at the moment, but obviously that applies across any recruiting. What can they do? How can they start? And I mean, what's their foot in the door? Do you know someone? Are there any internships that get offered for guys that want to do the job? So please just give us a bit of information there.
So if you want to be a tech recruiter, exactly that. So just sit down and wait for the feeling to pass. And if the feeling doesn't pass and you still feel like being a tech recruiter, I'd say you really have to understand the difference between recruitment and HR. Recruitment, the sales element, where HR, you focus more on, there might be some recruitment you need to do, but it's more on personal development plans and disciplinary hearings and all those good things. Yes. But I would also suggest speak to people who are in the industry, speak to people who've left the industry. Get the good, get the bad, get the ugly, because it's exactly that. Recruitment chooses you. It is a calling. And I laugh when you say that because, you know, I've gone into the corporate world and I'm like, oh no, I'm going to love corporate way more. And it's not true. Recruitment chose me and I love doing it. So you really have to get a good sense of what it is. And once again, don't just read one article, speak to one person, get a few different perspectives and then make up your own mind and find your own truth in all of that. So that would be my advice. Okay. As far as internships and learnerships, just if you do a search on some of these platforms, you'll be able to find some. And if you watch, if we have any learnerships, we'll certainly post those and let you know if you'd like to be part of the team on this end as well.
Okay, great. Please, I think that will be of great use, yes. To sort of close off, just yet again, thank you for your time. And you actually, I'd say this was a very fruitful conversation. A part of it is actually because I can actually recall quite a number of points. You know, it's quite an awesome thing when the points that you mentioned, and I remembered having in the past having done the opposite when I was when I was applying for jobs. And I guess that's where part of the value is in changing our habits and doing things a different way, because I think that's wherein we'll actually see a change when people are actually applying for jobs. I mean, just that small minute change that someone actually makes or does is what could be that thing, is what might be that thing that leads them just one step closer to the job that they want to do. And yeah, so yeah, I don't know if there's any points that you'd like to add as well in the end, just to encourage any of the guys that might view this current episode.
Absolutely. Look, and likewise, I'd like to thank you for your time. You're taking your personal time to try and make a difference to people. You also have a real passion for helping people. So I think this is what it's going to take. It's going to take conversations, ideas, like you said, getting your hands dirty and making a difference. And really, I can truly appreciate how hard it is if you've been unemployed and people ignoring you and they're ghosting you. Please connect with people who care. Connect with people who aren't going to treat you like a product, because you're a human being, you're not a product. And there are people who believe that.
That's true. Then on that note, Marie, I hope, and then I'm just saying that I hope there will be many more conversations like this one, because as I said, I mean, you'd be blind to not have gotten some input from some sort of insight from this conversation that we had right now. And yeah, so just thank you yet again, and cheers.
Thank you.